It was 4 days before Christmas in Lockerbie, Scotland, and houses had their Christmas trees up and decorated with presents beneath them. The air was cool and crisp, the sun had set, and families were settled in their homes for the evening. It looked like the perfect Wednesday evening. Some were outside smoking a cigarette, others gathered in front of their televisions, and some sat around their tables enjoying conversation and dinner. The small town was quiet and peaceful, except for the occasional whir of a commercial airplane flying overhead. Without warning, a loud bang rang out in the sky, followed swiftly by a massive fireball. In the midst of the chaos, a second crashing sound erupted as the fuselage of a massive plane smashed into the town, leaving behind devastation, confusion, and a massive crater. This is the story of Pan Am Flight 103. Pan Am 103 is one of those bizarre, frustrating mysteries where the truth seems so tantalizingly close and yet so far. And today, we'll look into what we know about the crash. The aircraft operating Pan Am Flight 103 was a Boeing 747-121 MSN 19646, registered as N739PA and named Clipper Maid of the Seas. It was only the 15th 747 ever built, and first flew on January 25, 1970, being delivered to Pan Am on February 15th. Pan Am Flight 103 originated as a feeder flight, or a flight that connects smaller airports to larger hub airports, at Frankfurt Airport, West Germany, using a Boeing 727 and the flight number PA-103A. Both Pan Am and Trans World Airlines routinely change the type of aircraft operating different legs of a flight. PA-103 was bookable as either a single Frankfurt to New York or Frankfurt to Detroit itinerary, though a scheduled change of aircraft took place in London's Heathrow Airport. After the disaster, the flight number was changed indefinitely in accordance with standard practice among airlines after disasters. The Frankfurt, London, New York, Detroit route was being served by Pan Am Flight 3 until the company's dissolution in 1991. Flight 103 was under the command of Captain James B. McQuarrie, age 55, a Pan Am pilot since 1964 with almost 11,000 flight hours under his belt, of which more than 4,000 were accrued on 747s. He also previously served 3 years in the U.S. Navy and 5 years in the Massachusetts Air National Guard, where he held the rank of Major. The first officer was Raymond R. Wagner, age 52, a pilot with Pan Am since 1966 with almost 12,000 flight hours, of which almost 5,500 were in 747s. He'd previously served 8 years in the New Jersey National Guard. Their flight engineer was Jerry D. Averitt, age 46, who joined Pan Am in 1980 after almost 13 years with National Airlines, had more than 8,000 flight hours with nearly 500 of those on 747s. All 3 men were based out of John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York. 6 of the 13 cabin crew were naturalized U.S. citizens while working for Pan Am, and the cabin crew was based at Heathrow and lived in London area or commuted from around Europe. Upon its arrival at Heathrow Terminal 3 on December 21, 1988, the passengers and their luggage, as well as an infamously unaccompanied suitcase which was part of the interline baggage on the feeder flight, were transferred directly to Clipper Maid of the Seas, whose previous flight originated from Los Angeles and arrived via San Francisco as Flight PA-124, landing at noon and parking at Gate K-14. The plane, which operated the flight's transatlantic leg, pushed back from the terminal at 6:04 p.m. and took off from runway 27R at 6:25 p.m., bound for JFK Airport and then Detroit Metropolitan Wayne County Airport. Contrary to many popular accounts of the disaster, the flight, which had a scheduled gate departure of 6 p.m., left Heathrow Airport on time. Everything seemed normal for the first half hour of the flight. At 6:58 p.m., the aircraft established two-way radio contact with Shanwick Oceanic Area Control in Prestwick, Scotland. The transmission was made by Captain McQuarrie, and he said, quote, "Good evening, Scottish. Clipper 103. We are level at 310. To this, the controller responded, quote, 103, you are identified. Pan Am 103 approached the corner of the Solway Firth at 7:01 p.m., crossing the coast just a minute later. On the scope, the plane showed transponder code or squawk 0357 and flight level 310. Flight levels are an aircraft's altitude as determined by a pressure altimeter using the International Standard Atmosphere. It is expressed in hundreds of feet or meters. At this point, the flight was flying at 31,000 feet on a heading of 316 degrees magnetic, and at a speed of 313 knots calibrated airspeed. Things were going as planned so far. It looked like any other regular flight. But things would turn sour in just a matter of seconds. At 7:02:44 p.m., Alan Topp, the airways controller at Scottish Air Traffic Control Centre, transmitted its oceanic route clearance on behalf of Shanwick. Pan Am 103 did not acknowledge. Pan Am 103's squawk then flicked off at 55.08666670, negative 3.3291669, just slightly northeast of the village of Kettleholm. Air traffic control, finding this odd, reached out to the flight with no answer. A loud sound was recorded on the CVR before it cut out at 7:02:50 p.m. 5 radar echoes fanning out appeared instead of 1. Comparison of the CVR to the radio returns showed that, 8 seconds after the disaster, the wreckage had a 1 nautical mile spread. A British Airways pilot flying the London-Glasgow shuttle near Carlisle called Scottish ATC to report that he could see a huge fire on the ground. But what happened? Remember that unattended suitcase that came aboard the flight? Hidden inside this luggage was an explosive. This bomb exploded at 7:02:50 p.m. and broke the airplane apart. The explosion punched a 20-inch hole on the left side of the fuselage. Investigations showed that no emergency procedures had been started in the cockpit, since this was spontaneous. The CVR, located in the tail of the aircraft, was found in a field by police searchers within 24 hours. No distress call was recorded, though a 180 millisecond hissing sound could be heard as the explosion destroyed the aircraft's communications center. The explosion in the plane hold was magnified by the uncontrolled decompression of the fuselage. The aircraft's elevator and rudder control cables had been disrupted, and the fuselage pitched downwards and to the left. Investigators from the Air Accidents Investigation Branch of the British Department for Transport concluded that the nose of the aircraft was blown off and separated from the main fuselage within 3 seconds of the explosion. The nose cone was briefly held on by a band of steel, but facing aft like the lid of a can. It then sheared off, up and backwards to starboard, striking off the No. 3 engine and landing some distance outside the town, on a hill in Tundergarth. The fuselage continued moving forward and down until it reached 19,000 feet, when its dive became nearly vertical. Due to the extreme flutter, the vertical stabilizer disintegrated, which in turn produced large yawing movements. As the forward fuselage continued to disintegrate, the flying debris tore off both of the horizontal stabilizers, while the rear fuselage, the remaining 3 engines, and the fin torque box separated. The rear fuselage, parts of the baggage hold, and 3 landing gear units landed at Rosebank Crescent. The fuselage, consisting of the main wing box structure, landed in Sherwood Crescent, destroying 3 homes and creating a large impact crater. The 200,000 pounds of jet fuel ignited by the impact started massive fires, which destroyed several additional homes. Investigators determined that both wings had landed in the Sherwood Crescent crater, saying, quote, "The total absence of debris from the wing primary structure found remote from the crater confirmed the initial impression that the complete wing box structure had been present at the main impact." The British Geological Survey, 14 miles away at Eskdalmere, registered a seismic event at 7:03:36 p.m., measuring 1.6 on the moment magnitude scale, which was attributed to the impact. According to the report, the rest of the wreck composed of, quote, "the complete fuselage forward of approximately station 480 to station 380 and incorporating the flight deck and nose landing gear was found as one piece in a field approximately 2.5 miles east of Lockerbie." This field, located opposite Tundergarth Church, is where the wreckage, most easily identified with images of the incident in the media, fell, having fallen, quote, "almost flat on its left side, but with a slight nose-down attitude." And the devastation was only just beginning. If you're enjoying this video, leave me a like, subscribe to the channel for more content, and let me know down in the comments section below. Okay, let's look at the victims. 270 people were killed in the explosion and subsequent crash of Pan Am Flight 103. All 243 passengers and crew on the plane were killed, and 11 residents of Lockerbie were killed on the ground. Of the 270 fatalities, 190 were Americans and 43 were British. 19 other nationalities were represented, with 4 or fewer passengers per country. The bodies of 17 victims, 10 passengers and 7 Lockerbie residents were never found and were presumed to have been virtually vaporized by the fireball of the impact crater. The captain, first officer, flight engineer, a flight attendant, and several first-class passengers were found still strapped to their seats inside the nose section when it crashed in Tundergarth. A flight attendant was miraculously found alive, but she was so severely wounded that she unfortunately passed away before help could arrive. Some passengers may have been briefly alive after impact, with a pathologist report concluding that at least 2 of these passengers might have survived had they been helped in time. I cannot imagine the fear and agony they experienced. Rest in peace to everyone who passed in this horrifying explosion. 35 of the deceased were students from Syracuse University, and they were returning home for Christmas. There were also American and international diplomats and government officials, actors, doctors, CEOs, and more aboard, but they are just as important as the victims that didn't have fancy titles attached to their names. Though the presence of these government officials did give rise to conspiracies that this flight was targeted in particular because of this. Something beautiful did come out of all of this: humanity. Many of the passengers' relatives, mainly from the US, arrived in Lockerbie within days to identify the dead. Volunteers from Lockerbie set up and staffed canteens which stayed open 24 hours a day and offered relatives, soldiers, police officers, and social workers free sandwiches, hot meals, drinks, and counseling. The people of Lockerbie laundered and ironed every piece of clothing that was found once the police had determined they were of no forensic value, so that as many items could be returned to the relatives as possible. The BBC Scotland correspondent, Andrew Castle, reported on the 10th anniversary of the bombing that the townspeople had, quote, opened their homes and hearts to the relatives, bearing their own losses, quote, stoically and with enormous dignity, and that the bonds forged back then last even up until today, 36 years later. As divided as humanity can seem, we really are all united, especially in great times of tragedy. And it's so wonderful to see here how those connections can make a truly lasting impact. Hats off to the people of Lockerbie. Now, there were 2 warnings we have got to mention. The first is the Helsinki warning, taken on December 5th, 1988. The FAA issued a security bulletin saying that, on that day, a man with an Arabic accent had telephoned the U.S. Embassy in Helsinki, Finland, and told them that a Pan Am flight from Frankfurt to the United States would be blown up within the next 2 weeks by someone associated with the Palestinian militant Abu Nidal organization. He said a Finnish woman would unwittingly carry the bomb aboard. The State Department and the U.S. government took this seriously, cabling the bulletin to numerous embassies. The FAA sent it to all U.S. carriers, including Pan Am, which had charged each of the passengers a $5 security surcharge, promising a, quote, program that will screen passengers, employees, airport facilities, baggage, and aircraft with unrelenting thoroughness. What a joke. Seriously, the security team in Frankfurt found the notice under a pile of papers on a desk the day after the bombing. One of these security screeners, whose job was to spot explosive devices under X-ray, told ABC News that she had first learned what Semtex, a plastic explosive, was during her ABC interview 11 months after the bombing. They were undereducated and ill-prepared for what was to come, and 270 would pay the price for this ignorance. Secondly, we have the PLO's warning. Just days prior to the bombing, security forces in European countries, including the UK, were put on alert after a warning from the Palestine Liberation Organization that extremists might launch terrorist attacks to undermine the then ongoing dialogue between the US and the PLO. Despite these warnings from Palestine, the fingers of blame would point elsewhere soon enough. If you like history and disasters, make sure to check out my other channel, Shipwreck Sunday. I post there every Friday and Sunday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Alright friends, let's briefly look at the whodunit at hand, and the controversy that follows. On the day of the bombing, the French Directorate General for External Security was informed by their British counterpart MI6 that the UK suspected the Libyans to be behind the bombing, and several groups were quick to take responsibility for the action, according to CIA analysis. A male caller claimed that a group called the, quote, Guardians of the Islamic Revolution had destroyed the plane in retaliation for Iran Air Flight 655 being shot down by U.S. forces in the Persian Gulf the previous July. If you'd like to see that flight, let me know in the comments below. A caller claiming to represent the Islamic Jihad organization told ABC News in New York that the group had planted the bomb to commemorate Christmas. And yet another caller claimed the plane had been downed by Mossad, the Israeli intelligence service. Despite some of these being more credible than others, no blame could be assigned at this time. Under immense public pressure and scrutiny in 2003, Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi paid compensation to the victims' families, while maintaining that he personally had not ordered the attack. In February 2011, former Minister of Justice Mustafa Abdul Jalil stated in an interview with the Swedish newspaper Expressen that Gaddafi in fact had personally ordered the bombing. He claimed to possess, quote, documents that prove his allegation and that he is ready to hand them over to the International Criminal Court. We've yet to see said documentation. To put it lightly, the investigation was done decently well, but the court proceedings were mayhem. For years, the blame was passed around, and Abdelbasset al-Megrahi was convicted, but many doubt his guilt. He was released in 2009 on grounds of compassion due to a cancer diagnosis, and he would die shortly thereafter. On December 21, 2020, 32 years to the day after the bombing, the U.S. Attorney General announced that Abu Ajela Masoud Kahir al-Marimi, a Libyan national in custody in Libya, had been charged with terrorism-related crimes in connection with the bombing, accusing him of involvement in constructing the bomb. On December 11, 2022, the United States announced that they had him in custody. It really hasn't gone any further than that, and we may honestly never know what truly happened. I didn't go into details of the conspiracies or the courtrooms because, in the end, we truly just don't know due to the botched court proceedings, and we just may never know. What is important, and what we do know for certain, is 270 were lost in this apparent terrorist attack. To the 270 victims of Pan Am Flight 103 and the victims lost in Lockerbie as a result, may they rest in peace, and may their families find the truth they need, the justice they deserve, and the peace they desire.